Sous vide tri-tip is quickly becoming one of my favorite cuts of meat to eat. It's very flavorful. I hadn't heard of it until recently, and as I've been diving into it, I really have started to enjoy it. I first heard of it from Darren Wilson from Fire and Water Cooking, and it is just a delicious piece of beef, especially when you cook it sous vide. We're going to dive into everything you need to know about it coming up next on Amazing Food Made Easy. Hey there, I'm Jason Luxon from Amazing Food Made Easy and president of the International Sous Vide Association. And I can't wait to dive into all things tri-tip. I want to help make sure that you get the most out of this delicious cut of meat. But first, why sous vide tri-tip? Well, tri-tip is a pretty tender piece of meat compared to a lot of ones, but it still has a decent amount of bite to it. When you cook it sous vide, you can really tenderize it at any temperature you want. So it's a little more tender, a little more juicy, retains a little more moisture. Plus, you can cook it perfectly edge to edge with none of that bullseye effect. It also is easy to use sous vide to cook it ahead of time, and then you can either finish on the smoker or on the grill to add some of that great smoky, delicious flavor for a good barbecue style tri-tip. Because tri-tip is often a little bit of a thicker cut as well, sous vide allows you to cook edge to edge at the perfect temperature, perfect doneness, without having to stress about pulling it off or overcooking some of the outside. A lot of times tri-tip can have a fat cap on it, and in those cases, you can either remove it before sous viding or make sure that when you finish it, that you let it cook for a little bit longer during the sear process to render some of that fat down. You don't want it to just be raw and kind of chewy fat on the outside. You really want to soften it up and render it to it's a little more palatable while you're eating the tri-tip. So what is the best time and temperature to sous vide tri-tip for? For timing, you can either just heat it through or pasteurize it. You can use any of the sous vide heating and pasteurization charts, like the ones on my site or the ones on Douglas Baldwin's site. For most size tri-tips, that's going to take 3 to 5 hours to heat it all the way through. So you can set that temperature maybe 2 degrees higher and you're knock about 30% off the cook time. And cooking for a little bit longer can be really helpful because it does usually come from the sirloin region, usually the top sirloin or bottom sirloin, and that's a little bit of a tougher cut. So the extra 12 to 24 hours of sous vide time can tenderize it, break it down just a little bit more so it's even more melt in your mouth and juicy than tri-tips normally are. You can cook it for up to 24 hours with really good results. It's going to really transform the meat into a lot more tender version of a tri-tip with all the great flavor still there. For me personally, I usually do 10 to 12 hours. It's a good kind of middle range, and it still has some bite at the end that tri-tip's known for, but it's not chewy, it's never tough, and it's always going to be very flavorful and tender to eat. It's like a really, really good steak. Whatever the desired doneness is that you're looking for, there's a few options out there. I have lots of recipes on my site. You can also check out Kenji Lopez from Serious Eats, Chef Steps Crew, and a lot of other good resources are out there that you can see what they do and then take it in your own direction. But regardless of your desired doneness, or regardless of what time and temperature you do pick, here's the process for actually sous viding your tri-tip. I want to make sure that you know, if you're new to sous vide, kind of what the process looks like so you can get the most out of it. First step is to prep your tri-tip. This can be taking off some of the connective tissue, some of the fat if you're not into all the fat on it, and then you can salt it. You can add a spice rub if you want. Some people really like spice rub, some people hate them and just want to cook with salt, or some people even don't like salt. But I like to go with your own personal preference. I like salt, and I like adding a spice rub before I sous vide it. I don't recommend putting olive oil or butter in the bag. Those seem to dilute the flavors of the meat. And be careful if you're putting in garlic, ginger, onion, other things that are kind of aromatics, because they're not going to cook at the low temperatures. So you're just imparting raw garlic flavor instead of that nutty sweet garlic that we think of when you're like roasting something. So lots of great places that you can get tri-tip because it's not sold nationwide yet. They call it different things, so you can find it. It's not like it's a weird part of the animal. It's just a different way of butchering it. So you can ask your butcher for it. They'll probably be able to find it. So I always recommend getting to know your local butcher. There's also a lot of good online places. Porter Road, Allen Brothers, and Snake River Farms are my 3 go-tos when I want a little bit better, higher quality meat than I can find locally. But places like Costco will often have tri-tip, so you can ask around and see who has it in stock, then go pick some up. Because it is a great piece of meat. You just can't find it everywhere around the country right now. A lot of people want to know, can you cook tri-tip from frozen? And the answer is yes. If you're just heating it through, you want to increase your cooking time by about 40%. If you're tenderizing it, then just add an hour or two and you should be completely fine. You don't have to thaw it. You can just take it directly from the freezer, put it in the sous vide machine, and you're good to go. I do recommend when you're packaging to not use the store packaging. Some of them come in, prepackaged vacuum bags. Unless you know that that's food safe and heat safe, I recommend taking it out, seasoning the food, and then resealing it in something that you know is going to be safe and watertight in your own sous vide machine. You can also marinate the meat before you sous vide it. Just make sure you do the whole marination process like you normally would. Remove it from the marinade, and then you can put it in a sous vide bag and you're ready to cook it. Once you've prepped it, added any spice rubs or salt, you can then seal it. You can use pretty much any sort of packaging. The classics are Ziploc freezer bags. You can use water displacement method on. You can also use a edge sealer. Food Saver is the big one there, or a chambered vacuum sealer. Works very well if you have one of those at home. I have a Backmaster. My parents use a Polyscience, which are both great machines. If you don't want to use a plastic bag, you can also use like a silicone stasher bag. Those work really well. And a few other companies sell silicone bags that you can use if you don't want the plastic next to your food. When you remove the air, you don't have to worry about getting all of it out. You just want most of it. So the water will be in contact with the food. You don't really need a vacuum in it. It's just the removal of most of the air. So the heat transfer works a lot better. So it gets back up to that desired doneness you're looking for. When it's sealed, you're ready to set your sous vide machine to the temperature that you want to cook it at. I like 131 to 135 for medium rare. Some people prefer going up to 140 for medium. And if you want well done, you can go up to 145 or 150. As long as you stay below the 152 mark, it's still going to be pretty juicy. Once you get above 154, you're really going to start overcooking the food, and that's where it gets more braised-like, and I think it loses a lot of the juiciness. So try to stay below 154, even if you prefer a well-done tri-tip. I prefer 131. I think that leads to the best results, and it's the perfect temperature for what I'm looking for. For timing, if you're just going to heat it through, you can use any of the sous vide heating or pasteurization charts that are out there. I have some on my website. Douglas Baldwin also has some. There's a lot of other ones out there from reputable sources. If you're cooking for a little bit longer, for 12 to 24 hours to tenderize it, then you don't really have to worry about the timing nearly as much, and you can just let it go until it reaches the level of tenderization that you're looking for. It gets the desired doneness that you want. People ask, what's a good sous vide machine if you don't have one yet? My answer is always either Anova, Polyscience, or Vesta, or the Joule. Those are kind of my big four that I use a lot and I really like. They all have very high quality machines that range from $60 for the Anova Nano up through $600 for the Polyscience Hydro Pro Plus. But they're all really good machines with companies that stand behind their products and are happy to fix things when things do go wrong, unlike some of the really inexpensive circulators that can be out there. There's other good brands, but those are the big four that I usually turn to. So once you put your food into the water, let it cook for long enough to either heat through or tenderize to the level of doneness you're looking for. At that point, you can remove it from the sous vide water bath. You can either chill it in the bag in a cold water bath and then throw it in the fridge for a few weeks, or you can move on to the finishing steps. When you take it out of the bag, you want to make sure you dry it off really well because you can't get a sear until the moisture is gone. So you want to remove that either with paper towels. I also have some dishcloths that I use specifically to remove sous vide juices so I don't ruin any of my wife's good dishcloths. But whatever you do, you want to make sure you get that water off of the outside of the meat. Paper towels work really good for that. The only exception to this is if you're going to smoke it, having that moisture on is good because the smoke will cling to the water particles. And then you can move on to the steps of searing. There's lots of different ways that you can finish a sous vide tri-tip. The two most common are probably searing it on the grill or smoking it. Smoking is a great way to add additional flavor to it. But you can use a cast iron pan, a hot skillet, whatever is easiest for you to get a good sear on the food. And you have to remember that the food's already at the perfect temperature right now. So you don't want to raise the temperature. You set it to a temperature you liked, you heated it through, and it now is at that temperature. So if you sear it for too long, you're going to start overcooking your food. You can let it chill a little bit beforehand. I usually let my meat sit on the counter for 10 to 15 minutes so the temperature comes down some and gives me a little bit of a longer window for my sear. But if you're trying to smoke it, I recommend fully chilling it in a ice bath. You can reheat it to the temperature that you cooked it at sous vide. It'll give you a lot longer time on the smoker to add all that smoke flavor to it. When you smoke it, just make sure that the internal temperature doesn't raise above what you sous vided it at, and you should be good to go. But as I said, it's very easy to also just sear it on the grill or in a hot cast iron pan with an oil with a high smoke point like ghee, avocado oil. unprocessed light, olive oil, any of the ones that can go to a higher temperature before they start smoking and setting off your fire alarm. You just want to cook it for 30 to 60 seconds, give it a flip, another 30 to 60 seconds, flip 1 or 2 more times, and you should have a nice golden brown crust without raising the internal temperature too much more. Once you've seared it or smoked it, it is now ready to serve. There's lots of different ways to serve tri-tip. One of my favorites is to thinly slice it and to serve it with some corn on the cob and some potato salad. A lot of people like putting on some barbecue sauces or some chutneys, hot sauce. There's a lot of different ways that you can take this in any direction. So even if you can't find a good sous vide finishing recipe, what you can do is find a good tri-tip recipe in general with the sides and sauces you're looking for. Then you can use my favorite simple sous vide tri-tip master recipe that I'm going to link up below. That steps you through the entire process so you can make sure your meat is perfectly cooked, and then you can serve it with all those sides and condiments that you want in your final meal. Now you know everything you need to know about how to make delicious, perfectly cooked sous vide tri-tip. It's going to wow your friends and family. It's going to be like a dish that you've never had before, especially if you cook tri-tip with traditional methods normally. This is a great variation that's going to be moist, it's going to be juicy, it's going to be full of amazing flavor. So give it a try. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments below. You can also ask in my Exploring Sous Vide Facebook group. We have over 40,000 sous vide cooks there exchanging information. You can access that at afmez.com/Facebook. Till next time, I'm Jason Logsdon.